My dear brothers and sisters, I want you to imagine standing on the plains of Arafah under the open sky, surrounded by thousands of companions, listening to the voice of the final messenger of Allah. It was the last sermon, the farewell message of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, a message not just for the people of his time, but for every believer until the end of time. He stood there, knowing that his mission on earth was almost complete. He knew that his words that day would echo through generations, that every sentence would carry a lifetime of wisdom, and that his Ummah would return to these words whenever it lost its way. Among the many things he spoke about in that timeless sermon, one message stands out with extraordinary force: his warning about riba, or interest. In that final address, after reminding us of the sanctity of life, honor, and wealth, the Prophet declared that all forms of riba were abolished forever, and he began by canceling the interest owed to his own family members. My brothers and sisters, think about that for a moment. Of all the topics that could have been addressed in his farewell message, a message meant to summarize a lifetime of revelation and guidance, the Prophet chose to speak about riba. Why? Because he knew that riba is not just a financial transaction. It is a weapon that can destroy faith, family, and entire civilizations. He was teaching us that if we want to build a society of justice, mercy, and compassion, we cannot build it on the foundation of exploitation. Riba is the opposite of mercy. It takes from those in need instead of giving to them. It turns compassion into business, and it replaces generosity with greed. The Prophet knew that riba would become widespread, that it would spread across the world, that people would rename it, disguise it, and justify it, until almost no one would be free from its shadow. And today, that prophecy has come true. We live in a world where riba is everywhere, in banks, in businesses, in governments, even in personal lives. It has become so normal that many no longer even question it. But just because something is common does not make it right. Let's reflect for a moment on why the Prophet's words about riba were so urgent. He wasn't speaking only about economic fairness, he was speaking about the survival of morality itself. When riba becomes normal, hearts become cold. The rich grow richer by taking advantage of the poor. People stop caring about the struggles of others. Society becomes divided not between good and evil, but between the lenders and the borrowers, the oppressors and the oppressed. That's why the Prophet didn't just warn us. He canceled riba completely in his final sermon. He didn't say reduce it or limit it. He said it's finished, gone, abolished. He wanted us to understand that as long as riba exists, justice can never exist. Now imagine the power of that message. The entire Arabian society at that time was built on riba-based transactions. The wealthy controlled the poor through loans, yet the Prophet stood in front of tens of thousands and said, that entire system ends today. No more exploitation, no more debt that multiplies hardship. It was a revolutionary moment, a moment that redefined what justice means in Islam. My dear brothers and sisters, we live in a world that has forgotten this message. Nations today are drowning in debt. Families are suffocating under interest-based loans. Individuals are spending their lives working not for freedom, but to pay off endless debts. People buy homes, cars, education, all with borrowed money, and spend decades paying back more than they borrowed. This is not progress. It is slavery disguised as convenience. When riba enters a society, the poor lose hope. The middle class loses peace. The rich lose mercy. And slowly, the entire community loses barakah, that divine blessing that makes little feel like enough. You see, the problem with riba is not only economic, it's spiritual. It removes barakah from our wealth. You may have more money in your account, but you will have less satisfaction in your heart. You may have a big house, but no tranquility inside it. You may have material success, but no peace of mind. That is what riba does. It takes away the soul of wealth. That is why the Prophet, in his final sermon, did not separate faith from finance. He made it clear that how we earn, how we spend, and how we deal with others financially are all part of our relationship with Allah. Islam is not a religion of rituals alone, it is a complete way of life. And one of its greatest purposes is to protect people from injustice, financial, emotional, and social. When we look at our world today, we see exactly what happens when this guidance is ignored. Countries are collapsing under debt. Economies rise and fall like waves. Families break apart because of financial pressure. People are working day and night but still living paycheck to paycheck. This is not just an economic problem, it is a spiritual sickness. Because when money becomes the center of life, faith moves to the side. The prophet's last sermon was meant to wake us up, to remind us that we cannot fix society while ignoring the moral foundations of our economy. We cannot talk about brotherhood and justice while participating in systems that exploit the weak. We cannot ask for Allah's blessings while living in ways that defy His guidance. But the beauty of Islam is that it never leaves us hopeless. The Prophet did not simply warn us about riba, he guided us toward alternatives built on mercy and fairness. Islam encourages trade, business, and investment, but only when they are based on honesty, transparency, and mutual benefit. It promotes charity, zakat, and interest, free lending to help the poor rise instead of sinking deeper into debt. It teaches us that money should serve humanity, not the other way around. In the last sermon, the Prophet was not only speaking to the people of Makkah and Medina, he was speaking to us, to the Muslims living in the modern age, surrounded by temptations and excuses, struggling to hold on to their faith in a world built on riba. His words echo to this day, reminding us that true success is not in numbers, not in possessions, not in the illusion of progress, but in obedience to Allah and fairness toward His creation. My dear brothers and sisters, if you take one thing from the Prophet's final message, let it be this: your wealth will not be blessed if it is earned through injustice. Your home will not be peaceful if it is built on oppression. Your life will not be content if it is driven by greed. But if you purify your income, if you trust in Allah instead of the system, if you give up what is haram for the sake of what is halal, then even if you have less, you will feel richer than those who have everything. The last sermon was not just a speech. It was a roadmap for humanity. It was a call to live with dignity, justice, and mercy. And one of the greatest acts of mercy we can perform today is to protect ourselves and others from the chains of riba. If you are in debt, don't lose hope. Start with intention. Seek forgiveness. Look for halal alternatives. Ask Allah to make a way for you. And remember, every small effort you make to leave riba behind is a step toward freedom, a step toward barakah, and a step toward living by the legacy of the Prophet. And if you are among those who are free from it, then help others. Be the one who lends without charging. Be the one who gives without expecting more. Be the one who makes life easier for people, not harder. Because that is the example of our Prophet, a man who came to lift burdens, not add to them, to give people hope, not despair. Brothers and sisters, the Prophet's last sermon was a farewell, but it was also a beginning for those who would carry his message forward, a message of unity, equality, and justice, a message that forbids exploitation in every form, a message that will always stand against riba, no matter how much the world normalizes it. So today, as we remember his words, let us ask ourselves, have we lived by his message? Have we built our homes and our nations on the principles he left behind? Have we protected the weak, honored the poor, and ensured fairness in our dealings? Or have we allowed riba to quietly take control of our lives while we look the other way? The answer lies in our choices in how we earn, how we spend, and how we care for those around us. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, taught us that every act of justice brings us closer to Allah, and every act of oppression distances us from him. And riba, no matter how small it seems, is a form of oppression. Let us return to the message of that final sermon. Let us return to the principles of fairness, compassion, and mercy. Let us build families and nations that are not slaves to riba, but servants of Allah. Because the true wealth of a believer is not in what he possesses, but in the contentment of his heart and the purity of his earnings. May Allah grant us the strength to live by the Prophet's final message. May He free our families and our nations from the grip of Riba. May He fill our lives with Barakah, our hearts with peace, and our wealth with purity, and may we be among those who hear the message of the Prophet and respond to it with sincerity, obedience, and love. My dear brothers and sisters, imagine that moment, the desert sun shining down on thousands of believers, all gathered in silence, listening to the final words of the Prophet of mercy. Every heart trembled, every eye filled with tears, because everyone knew this was not just another sermon, this was his farewell to the Ummah. The man who had guided them from darkness to light was now sealing his mission with timeless words. And among all the things he could have spoken about, he chose to speak about Riba. That alone tells us how serious and destructive it is. When he declared that all forms of Riba were abolished forever, he was not making an economic policy, he was protecting humanity. He began by canceling the Riba owed to his own family, the Riba connected to his uncle, to show that no one was above this command. That moment was a declaration that Islam is a religion of justice, not favoritism, mercy, not exploitation. It was a call to end a system that thrives on the suffering of others. He ended it at its root so that no one could claim permission to profit from another person's hardship. Riba, my brothers and sisters, is not just about percentages or numbers written on a page. It is about hearts. It is about how people treat one another. When Riba enters a society, love turns into greed, and compassion turns into business. A neighbor no longer helps his neighbor out of care, he helps for gain. Families stop sharing what they have and start calculating what they can get back. The beautiful spirit of giving that Islam teaches is replaced by a culture of taking. That is why Riba is not only forbidden, it is condemned as a poison to the soul and to society. The Prophet understood what we only see now with our own eyes. He saw how Riba creates a cycle of pain. The poor grow poorer, the rich grow richer, and the middle is crushed in between. He saw that Riba turns human dignity into a commodity, where people are valued not for their character but for their credit. And today, look at our world. Look at how families are torn apart by the pressure of loans. Look at how young couples begin their marriages with the weight of interest, struggling to survive under systems built on greed. Look at how nations are trapped, borrowing more just to pay back what they owe. It is a never-ending chain, and every link in that chain was warned against by the Prophet in his final sermon. When he spoke those words, he was not only talking about the marketplaces of Mecca and Medina. He was speaking to us, to this generation drowning in loans, to people who trade peace for luxury, who measure success by possessions rather than by piety. His words echo through time. Riba destroys the soul of a community. It makes you forget who you are and what you stand for. It removes Barakah, that unseen blessing that gives value to every little thing you own. You may have more money, but you'll never have enough. You may build bigger houses, but not happier homes. You may earn a high income, but you'll lose inner peace. That is the curse of Riba. It takes everything sweet in life and makes it bitter. The Prophet's warning was both practical and spiritual. He wanted to protect our wealth, but more importantly, our hearts. He wanted us to live in a society built on fairness and trust, where the rich help the poor, where compassion flows naturally, and where no one takes advantage of another's need. But when Riba becomes normal, that entire structure collapses. People begin to worship money instead of the one who provides it. We become servants of numbers, chasing a happiness that keeps running away from us. Islam teaches something radically different. It teaches that wealth is a test, not a trophy, that every coin earned honestly, every transaction made with integrity, carries blessings far greater than interest could ever offer. True richness, as the Prophet said, is not in how much you own, but in how content your heart is. When you earn with honesty, even a little feels abundant. When you avoid what is forbidden, even hardship brings peace. But when riba enters your income, it brings anxiety, greed, and emptiness no matter how high the numbers rise. So, my brothers and sisters, this is not just a rule to follow, it's a mercy to embrace. The Prophet, in his last moments of public speech, reminded us to stay away from riba because he loved us. He wanted us to live with dignity, not desperation. He wanted the Ummah to stand on justice, not oppression. He wanted children to inherit peace, not debt. That's why his message must not remain words on a page. It must live in our daily choices. If we truly claim to love the Prophet, then our love must show in our actions. We must refuse to take or give riba in any form, even when it seems small, even when it seems acceptable. We must find halal alternatives, support ethical systems, and stand together to create an economy based on care, not cruelty. When Muslims return to justice in their dealings, the world will see again what made the early generations so powerful, not their wealth, but their faith, not their gold, but their goodness. The Prophet's farewell sermon was his heart speaking to ours. It was a reminder that the true strength of an Ummah lies not in its banks or buildings, but in its compassion and character. The moment we abandon what he abolished, we lose the peace that came with his message. But if we hold on, even when it's difficult, Allah will replace what we give up with something far greater barakah, contentment, and eternal reward. Let us remember this, not as history, but as a living command. Let every contract we sign, every coin we earn, every decision we make, reflect the purity the Prophet left us with. Let us be the generation that brings back fairness, that restores barakah, that lives the words he spoke on that blessed day. Because when we remove riba from our lives, we don't just fix our finances, we heal our hearts, strengthen our families, and rebuild our nations. Riba is not just a financial system, it's a test of faith. The Prophet's last sermon was not a lecture, it was love. A love so deep that it warned us against the very thing that could destroy us. If we truly want peace in this world and success in the next, then we must live by that love, uphold that justice, and walk away from every trace of riba, not out of fear, but out of faith. That is the legacy of the final sermon, and it is our duty to live it, protect it, and pass it on. My beloved brothers and sisters, it is painful but necessary to admit that one of the greatest warnings ever given to humanity has been forgotten by the very people it was meant to protect. When the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, stood on that sacred ground and delivered his final sermon, his words carried the weight of revelation and mercy. He spoke not just to the people of his time, but to every generation until the end of time. He warned us about injustice, about pride, about oppression, and among those warnings was one that echoes like thunder the warning against riba. Yet today, the world has become a mirror of what he warned us to avoid. We have allowed the very system he abolished to rise again and dominate every aspect of our lives. Riba is no longer seen as evil, it is presented as normal, even necessary. It hides behind modern words and fancy phrases, interest rates, returns, profits, growth. But no matter what we call it, the reality remains the same. It is the same exploitation the Prophet forbade, the same trap that turns mercy into manipulation and kindness into business. And we, as an Ummah, have become so used to it that it doesn't even make us uncomfortable anymore. We have built our lives, our dreams, our nations on the very foundation that the messenger of Allah warned us would bring destruction. Look around, my brothers and sisters. We live in a time where almost every part of life is touched by riba. The student who dreams of an education must borrow money and spend years in debt. The young couple who wishes to marry and build a home signs contracts that will chain them for decades. The businessman who wants to grow his trade is told that he cannot compete without loans and interest. Nations once proud and independent now beg from other nations, trapped in endless cycles of borrowing and repayment, and all of this has been normalized, justified, and even celebrated as progress. Yet what progress can there be when hearts are restless, when homes are full of stress, when entire generations live under the shadow of debt? The truth is that Riba has done more than destroy wealth, it has destroyed faith in fairness. It has corrupted the way we see one another. Instead of compassion, we have competition. Instead of brotherhood, we have business. The system teaches us to value profit over people, to measure success not by how much we give, but by how much we take. It turns us into consumers, not believers. It traps us in a world where everything has a price and nothing has true value. This is not just an economic problem, it is a spiritual crisis. The Prophet's last sermon was meant to protect us from this very disease of the heart. The tragedy is that many Muslims today feel powerless. They say, there is no other way. The world runs on interest. How can we live without it? But that is exactly what the enemy of faith wants us to believe, that the laws of Allah are outdated, that the Prophet's words no longer apply. Yet the reality is the opposite. His guidance is timeless because human greed and human need are timeless. What he forbade, then, is the same injustice that continues to enslave people today. The names may change, the systems may look different, but the oppression remains the same. We must remember that the same God who forbade riba is the one who provides sustenance. He does not close a door without opening another. He does not forbid something without offering something better. Allah tests us to see who trusts him, who chooses faith over convenience, who believes that obedience brings blessings even when the world says otherwise. The Prophet's message was never about comfort, it was about conviction. He didn't tell us to follow the crowd, he told us to stand firm on truth, even if we stand alone. So, my brothers and sisters, what can we do in this time when riba seems to surround us from every direction? We start by waking up. We start by admitting that this is not normal, that this is not okay, that we have drifted away from the path of mercy. We begin by learning, by understanding the dangers of riba, by teaching our families, our children, our communities that true success does not come from what grows in numbers, but from what grows in barakah. We must support alternatives that align with our values, we must encourage fair and ethical trade, and we must build systems that honor compassion, not exploitation. Even small steps matter because every effort to distance ourselves from riba is a declaration that we still believe in the Prophet's message. Our youth need to be reminded that dignity does not come from luxury, but from integrity. Our families must remember that a small home built with halal earnings is far better than a mansion built on interest. Our leaders must realize that no nation built on debt can ever truly stand tall. The Prophet's sermon was not a historical event, it was a roadmap for revival. It was a message to teach us that if we ignore divine guidance, we lose peace no matter how much we gain. We are living in a time when people have more money than ever but less happiness. We earn more but sleep less. We buy more but feel emptier. We have bigger houses but broken families. And behind so much of this suffering lies the same disease, riba, greed, injustice, and the abandonment of prophetic guidance. When Barakah leaves, nothing fills the space it leaves behind. But when we obey Allah, when we choose honesty and purity even in hardship, we will find that even a little is enough, and hearts will find rest again. This is not about perfection, it's about direction. Every small step toward leaving riba is a step closer to the mercy of Allah. Every person who makes an effort to earn halal, to avoid exploitation, to speak out against injustice, is continuing the legacy of the Prophet's final sermon. We cannot change the whole world overnight, but we can change our own choices and through them inspire others to do the same. The Prophet's warning was not meant to scare us, it was meant to save us. It was an act of love from a heart that cared more about our salvation than our comfort. He wanted us to be free from debt, free from greed, free from the control of systems that oppress. And today, if we truly claim to love him, then love demands that we listen, that we act, that we return to the values he lived and died for. So let this be our awakening. Let us revive the message that has been forgotten. Let us bring back fairness, kindness, and barakah into our dealings. Let us rebuild an ummah that stands not on interest, but on integrity, not on greed, but on generosity. Because when we remember the Prophet's last sermon, we remember who we are. And when we act upon it, we become the people he dreamed of, a community of justice, mercy, and faith, shining in a world darkened by greed. The time to awaken is now. The Prophet's words still echo across time, calling us to rise, to return, to rebuild. Let us not let those words fade into history. Let them live again in our hearts, in our homes, in our nations. For when we walk away from Riba, we are not losing profit, we are gaining peace. And that peace is priceless.